Mom? Yes. Joey says I'm good. So, good evening. I am pretty surprised that this class is in here, honestly. It's kind of scared. Richard gave us this opportunity, and, might as well take it. The PowerPoint, is it up? Okay, so this is the wisdom literature. So it's going to be an intro class. We're not really going to dive into the books tonight, and I'll explain why as we go forward. First half is going to kind of be explaining like what the class format is. Because again, this is going to be a class where we need the audience's participation as well, and you'll see why. Richard's been passing out, these lists. If you haven't got one, if you haven't got the reading list from Richard, raise your hand. He'll come give it to you. And so we're going to talk about the class format first. And, simply put, this class was meant to be designed around like the book club format. So how many of us have been in a book club? So most time what you do is you gather at someone's house, you read the chapter, and then go another month, someone else leads it sometimes it's that same person. Well, we're going to basically do it kind of like that format, but each week. And we're going to do it on these three books, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. To me, those books have significant, guidance and wisdom for us that we can use and apply in our daily lives. So this leads me to the next thing, and that is, what is the purpose of the class? And there's two main reasons for this class. So the first reason is, again, to help reflect on God's wisdom, to help provide us what, his text shows us over, the span of history. When you think about it, this book, the Bible, is a history book. It's a literature book as well. It's got poems, but it is significantly a history book. And in it, it's got philosophy, poems, story. It's got everything in it. This is the most impactful book. And therefore, when you think about it, it's going to be the most wise book. And those three texts, as I said, they're known as the wisdom literature. And so when we start this year off, we might as well start getting wiser. This is why we're also starting off with me, because I'm the most unwise. Let's get him out of the way. But the second reason also is that help encourage people to read the Bible outside of this building. That's why we have that reading list. It's a very simple list. It's a chapter a day, 10, 15 minutes most. And I'm one of these people, I just now started, I'm already kind of in trouble. You hear these people, I want to read the Bible within a year. I want to do that. And then you get halfway through. That's my New Year's resolution. Get halfway through. Oh, I'm 2 months behind. There's other people, one of the funniest stories I hear from Richard, it's when it was one of his first sermons he was talking about. There was a guy at one of his old congregations who basically said, Richard, I don't read the Bible. That's your job. I pay you for it. But no, that is not Richard's job. He encourages us each week. He helps us. He guides us with the elders, yes. But it's also our job to know the Scripture. We're not going to have every answer, and we're not going to know everything from this book, no matter how many times we read it. There's just going to be things that sometimes aren't over our heads. But we need to make the effort. He made the effort to give us the Word. So we need to make the effort to read His Word. And so this is going to be a stepping stone for some people. Other people probably have done it, so no biggie for them. But some of us, again, myself included, have always kind of struggled with reading the Scriptures outside. And so this is a great class to try to build the foundation for that. And so this goes to the last part of the intro, and that is, who will be teaching this class? Various people. Not just me. We're going to have various people. Here's the list. Tim's next week. I feel bad for Chad. Sorry, Chad. Didn't mean to do that. But some of them are elders, some of them are deacons, some of them are former deacons and elders, some of them are, men who have children in the youth group. We did this format against the book club style, but also because different people have different views, different perspectives. And in life, the latter part versus the middle part, the wisdom you've gained is different. When we look at wisdom, this world always wants to conflate it with intellect. Warren Buffett's wise because of his investments. Tom Cruise is wise because of the movie roles he makes. But that's not what wisdom is. Wisdom is the experience over that period of time of life and how you translate it. And the true wisdom is during life you understand God is a loving God, but he's a fearful God. And you have to show that in a way where you don't scare the next generation off. Because that happens a lot more than we realize. And so these men, they had different periods of their life, different experiences, different occupations, but they all have the Word as their foundation. And so that's why we have different teachers leading each week. Also, it's tax season. I'm pretty sure Paul's going to be like, no, you need to stay a little bit late tonight. So, sorry, Paul. It's tax season. All right. So that's kind of the format. Before we get into the intro, does anyone have any questions or thoughts about it?
I'm excited about this. I think it's going to help us all. The different perspectives. Within these books, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job alone are incredibly important, and we need these classes. I think by the end of this, 1 through 13, how encouraged are we going to be by every teacher that has come? And we're going to realize, look at the talent and blessings we have in this congregation.
Exactly. We have hidden gems all around us. And, again, this is a discussion place class. If you're going to say something, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. Raise your hand. Christian's got the mic. But yeah, this is also discussion based. So like the teacher will come up and teach. But if you saw something in the scripture, teacher maybe forgot. That's why we have different teachers also, because different things can be missed by other people. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. Any other thoughts before we move forward? Alrighty. So this is from the material I like to use a lot. It's Kaufman commentaries. I like them, so I like tools. It's free. You just got a lot of ads to worry about. They pop up every now and then. It gets annoying. But it's free. Kaufman commentaries at Study Light. And then the World Video Bible School. I like to use their notes. They got a lot of good ones. And so the first book we're going to look at is Proverbs. And as we see that the author is, there's three authors, King Solomon, Agar, if I'm saying that correctly, and King Lemuel. Some actually say that chapters 22 through 24, portions of them, are actually written by unknown wise men. But when we look at the authorship, we also need to take into account some other things about them. Some people believe that King if I'm saying it right, Lemuel, Agar ben Jeketh, these are epithets. These are other names for Solomon as well. So it's not proven, but some people think that some people through rabbinical teachings believe that Agar ben Jeketh is an epithet for Solomon in the sense that when you look at Agar, it means the compiler, the one who first gathered. So they're saying that Solomon's gathering his Proverbs during this time, and that Ben Jeketh, or son of, is that the one who put out or disperse. So bring out the Proverbs. Others think that Agar was just a wandering man from the East, Asia Minor, who collected Proverbs and helped collect Solomon's. And King Lemuel, the thing that they look at, they try to point with him is they look at 1 Samuel 11:1. That's where Bathsheba makes the vow while he's in the womb, and they some people kind of think like this might be that vow instance in the sense that Solomon is reflecting he heard the vow. Again, there's no proof of it. That's tradition. So, but regardless, the main thing is that these are inspired proverbs. They're inspired by God. And so the next part I want to look at in Proverbs is the purpose. So the purpose is to show what God-fearing people in this world want to seek and what to avoid. This is a simple, like, do-don't book, if you look at it. You know, we're always scared when we think of Proverbs because it's a lot to take in. But a lot of it is a do-don't list. Do not do this and do not do that. Do this, do not do that. That's why it's probably one of the wisest books in the world, because it's simply just telling you straightforward. And as we see going forward, these books actually do build upon each other. The next book is Ecclesiastes that we'll be looking into. There's no author in Ecclesiastes. There's no named author in a sense, but everyone points to it being Solomon. They point it to being Solomon for three reasons. Mainly that Solomon was the only son of David who was the king of Jerusalem, as we will see in the beginning of how it's read out in chapter 1. The wisdom theme is appropriate for Solomon. As we see in 1 Kings 3:9, Solomon asked for wisdom. He's granted it. And so it fits the motif. And then the last reason is that they think it's Solomon. We know Solomon wrote Proverbs because Ecclesiastes 12:9, also kind of referencing 1 Kings 4:32 and Proverbs 1:1, the preacher says the preacher searched out and arranged many proverbs. We know of no one else besides Solomon who did this. So you can deduce that the preacher and Solomon are one the same. And the purpose of Ecclesiastes is to show which is the best way to spend one's life on this short world, in this short life. If I can speak, sorry. When you look at Ecclesiastes, as we'll delve into, it's a very depressing book. It's called The Skeptic. It's called many depressing things because it touches on themes that sometimes we don't want to look at. One of the eye-opening things that I always remember of it is, and I'm paraphrasing it, it's basically time marches on without you. You're gonna die and time marches on, no one's gonna remember you. I think that's in the first chapter. It just starts out like that, first couple chapters. And it's very hard. When you start reading it, it is a downer at the beginning, but as you move towards Ecclesiastes, what it shows is there are things in this life that are going to happen. But how are you going to spend that time? We look at Proverbs, again, they build on each other, they're building blocks. Proverbs shows us what to seek and avoid. But just because we know how to seek and avoid something, how should we do it? Should I ignore some of the things to seek, take up some of the things to avoid? Do I think that's wise? Do I think maybe this elder that's teaching me this is wrong, as so many youth believe, as I did sometimes as a youth? I thought my elders were wrong, and I seeked wrong things. And as I got older, I said, they were right. I was wrong. That's pretty wise. Let's bring it up. So they're building upon each other. And then the next book, the last book that we'll look at, this is Job. And Job is a very interesting book because it precedes both these in a chronological sense, as we'll look later. Job precedes these historically. No one knows the author of Job. It does not say at all who wrote Job. Nowhere. Who thinks they know who the author of Job is? And where does it say that? Precisely. Job is just we know it's an inspired book because it's in the Bible. The Hebrews put it in their Mosaic text, so they went through the rigorous of vetting every scripture, but no one knows who wrote it. And so when you look at the author, there are many candidates that people look at something. Maybe it's Job himself who wrote it. Job wrote it. There's no proof. Some think it's Moses who wrote it. There in the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, I'm saying this right, the Batari 15a, verse 14, talks about how it was Moses, as he was writing, or not as he was writing the Talmud, as they were entering in the land during the spies. And I could pull it up real fast. I have it saved. But it's very interesting what they say. Again, I don't believe it's right, but we'll see why some people believe certain authors wrote this because of Talmudic tradition. So in 15a, if I get to it, 15a, verse 14 of the Talmud, what they wrote. Rava says, Job lived at the time of the spies who Moses sent to scout the land of Canaan. This is proven by the fact it was written here, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. So they point to the very first verse. They say that, they're using that as proof, and it is written, there is an account of the spies, whether there are trees in it, that's Numbers 13. The Gemara asks, is it comparable? Here are the words that is used as Uz, whereas there is the word of etz. So the answer is, this is what Moses said to Israel. So there's going to be a back and forth, primarily in this section, on who wrote Job, as we'll see. But no one knows who writes Job. So some think it's Moses. Others think it's Solomon. They think Solomon wrote it later on after he experienced these things. And so he wrote the story of Job to compile them. I don't think that's true. I think Job is a historical figure. And then some look at post-exilic dates. So when you look at 15b of the same one, they think it's Hezekiah who wrote it, because Hezekiah also helped compose some of the Proverbs as well later on. Or not compose, but like bring them together. Others think, this is the times of the judges, that this was happening while the period of the judges were going on. But again, no one knows. Again, some think it may be Ezekiel, some may think it's Isaiah, but no one knows. And I spend a lot of time because there are some things that we're not privy to, no matter how big, no matter how small they are. And this is kind of a small one, but many people speculate all the time. It's just sometimes better to accept that we're not going to know who the author is. And the purpose of Job, he kind of connects these two previous books. His is basically the grappling with the ever-present problem of human suffering. So we know in this world that innocent children will die. We know in this world, people who don't deserve it will, lose a limb. Wars happen. There's human suffering. And you could build upon Proverbs and you could build upon Ecclesiastes. It seems fine, but then when you get to Job, you actually see it play out and your heart mourns, in a sense, because you're kind of seeing it. And so that's what Job is trying to show, is that we will face a suffering sometimes on this earth. How do we deal with it? How do we spend our life? And what do we seek and avoid? They all tie together. And that wisdom helps us move forward, knowing that there is a tomorrow, there is an everlasting life. Christian.
You mentioned that you believed that Job is a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Were you planning to just look briefly at James 5?
I'll go for it.
So James, in James 5:11, it says, "Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You've heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful." So James mentions that Job is a real person.
Yeah, and I think there's other instances as well. Let me see. Ezekiel, I believe, James 5:11 points it out, but also Ezekiel 14:14 and 14:20 also. If y'all, we don't need to read it, but if y'all want to look, this is from the Kaufman commentary. The Holy Spirit confirms Job's history by mentioning as a historical person the Old Testament of Ezekiel 14:14 and 20, as well as the New Testament, James 5:11. So if someone wants to get that real fast, raise your hand. Christian will get it. I don't. My Bible's over there. Kind of being bad tonight.
You said 14 through 20?
Yeah.
I can read that. Ezekiel 14 through 20.
Mm-hmm.
Even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver but their own lives by their righteousness, declares the Lord.
So he connects Daniel and the other individual as historical figures, pointing them out as being there. So any other thoughts before we move forward? Any question, Jeff?
Yeah, some hold that is Solomon, but they also simultaneously hold that Job is an actual historic figure, and it's possible that it's an account that had been passed down over time, and that Solomon just put it to pen. But we don't know, and it's true. Like whenever I hear about like ancient sources saying, "Oh, we think that so and so wrote this," but what's funny is just kind of like what you demonstrated. You'll find that their reasoning is based on nothing more than what's available to us, which is the book itself. They try to look at the book and see if there's any hints as to who wrote it. And so sometimes we think they may have had like this insight that we don't. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But a lot of times they're just, well, look at what it says in the book, So we can see that was just as hard for them like almost 2,000 years ago as it is for us right now. So
Yeah, again, in that same section of the Talmud, the Bharati, 15a through 16a, they do like half chapters in it. They go from it being Job, one rabbi saying it's Job, to the other saying, no, it was in the time of the judges, it was Moses, to someone else saying, no, Solomon wrote it. And they go back and forth. And like Jeffrey said, it's very important because people will take they'll take the littlest bite and they make it grow. It makes me think of the Gnostics in the second and third century and how they took these little things and expanded upon. We have the secret knowledge, and then we see first, second, and mainly first and second, but part of John 3 kind of warning about false teachers, warning about these groups coming up. And that's something that we have to worry about. So sometimes we're not privy to who the author is, but it doesn't matter who the author is as long as it's inspired. I'm fine. Any other thoughts before we move forward? Michael.
One other thing I like about Job, or at least the story, is we still don't know when it happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it could have been pre-flood, it could have been post-flood. And so with that, he could have been under any number of different laws of God, right? But still, we saw that he was still able to grapple with the problem of human suffering, as you mentioned, and how he dealt with that. So, I mean, it's a very timeless story that is very applicable throughout the history of the Bible. So
That's the perfect time to transition to this next slide, the time frame, chronological time frame. So, like Michael said, we don't know when Job took place. A lot of scholars believe it was probably between 2100. I thought I sent an updated slide. It could have been farther than 2000. Some think maybe the mid-19 BCE era. Somewhere they think between that era. Some believe that the story was kind of between Genesis 10 and 11, so that would be after the flood, but before Babel. So they think maybe it took place between that era. Some say it could have taken place no later than chapter 33 of Genesis. One of the several reasons why they point that out is when you look at it, the family structure of Job was a very patriarchal family. Matches the patriarchal system, like Michael was saying. Another thing, too, though, is that there's no reference to the law at all being established. So, I mean, maybe Moses is around. He's a Gentile. He can still worship God. But most likely, the only covenant probably may have been the Noahic covenant, if anything. There's no law. Something to look at when you're reading it. Another one is that the wealth that's measured is in cattle and slaves, more so than actual like gold. And also the length of Job's life is around 140 years after the events when you look at it. So remember, a little bit before the flood, God said, all right, going forward, humans here onward, capped at 120. That is the highest we're going, no more, no less. You guys have abused this whole thing called living. No more 900 years. So 140. And then the monetary unit mentioned that's found is only found in Genesis 33 that they use. So some people think, and that's in Job 42:11. So they think that this was probably around the patriarchal time between 2100 BCE and probably mid-1900 BCE, which is a long time. So that's where they're kind of putting it. They don't really know, but they know it's going to be around that time. Next, we're going to look at Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. And this was very striking because when you're looking at the history of Solomon, the man himself, you're just like, oh, you're underaccomplished. So one of the things is, he's probably born around 990 BCE, but he becomes king, between 970 and 967. So he's like a young king in his 20s, It's thought that he written, these are my old slides, so I kind of changed the wording because I rushed it. But he probably wrote, and the Proverbs came around by 959 BCE. So that means Solomon was roughly around my age when he wrote the Proverbs, which makes me feel very underaccomplished as a person because I don't have that wisdom yet, and I yearn for that. But another thing, too, to think about when you look at Ecclesiastes, it's thought that he wrote and composed that around 937. And so if you're doing the math, he's around 53 at this age. It's later on in life. And it's thought that he died in 931, so at the age of 59. So when you look at Ecclesiastes and when you're reading it, just remember that Job is probably near the end, whether he realizes it or not. He writes Proverbs kind of like in the mid, and then when you look at Ecclesiastes, he's writing it towards the end. He's giving off that last bit of wisdom. And I think that's why it's kind of like more darker than Proverbs. Maybe but he probably knows that his time's coming short. Maybe, maybe not, but it's darker because he's gained and he's seen kind of like the glut of the world, the gunk.
Away from God.
Turning away, and not just turning away, but possibly, again, writing Ecclesiastes to try to right the wrongs. You look at Ecclesiastes, kind of combining that with Proverbs. Proverbs, a lot of it is, don't get drunk, but also look for a good wife. And then in Ecclesiastes, he's like, it's harder than you think in life to look for a good wife. So, fear the Lord. So,
Fred, I think Solomon, I may or may not need this. I think Solomon comes to the conclusion that the only thing that matters in life is our relationship with God. Everything else, and he did everything else, and he said it, is the reason it's taken the darker turn, because he's done everything, and it's all vanity.
yeah.
But, he, in the last chapter of Ecclesiastes, he says how to do it, worshiping your Creator.
And that's important that you mentioned the vanity part, because, he talks about it, the vanity part. In my notes, if I can find it, the word hevel is kind of used correlating with vanity, and that just means smoke. It's like a gray smoke. So it's kind of like, it looks like there's something there, but really, there's nothing there at all. You can pass your hand through it. It's a mirage in the sense. that's essentially what I had for the class. I was going to leave 10 minutes just for any thoughts, any questions. I have some other fun facts if y'all want me to dig them up about it, but I kind of wanted to leave the last little bit for y'all. If y'all had questions about the class or thinking about it, things related to the intro that maybe that I don't know about Solomon or Job.
I know that the Proverbs are compiled and chapters are not always original, but as a result, Proverbs 31 chapters, and you can read a chapter a day, for a month, and give or take, double up one day. It's such an encouragement, and in the way it's structured, that we can have wisdom every day of the week. And it's something that it doesn't matter how many times you read through the Proverbs. I tell you, there are times I'll go through and I'll be reading through it and I'll say, well, I didn't do that this week. I did not do that last week. Wow, it is incredible how this applies to could have been written that day.
Yeah, Proverbs, again, when you just look at the bare bones of it, it's just a do and don't list. And sometimes the simplest do's and don'ts are the best because it's just straightforward. Going about the structure, again, this is from World Video Bible School. And this is their notes. They have 9 rules for interpreting the Proverbs. And so I'll just go through them real fast. Proverbs are often parabolic, so figurative point of views beyond themselves. So always remember, they're a parable like Christ gave the parables. In a sense, Proverbs are intensely practical, not theoretical. So if you overthink it, you're going to miss the point of the proverb. It's,
I think the fact that we've got
Proverbs and Ecclesiastes together, back to back, is extremely important. As you've said, it's a do or don't list for Proverbs. Ecclesiastes is the example if you don't.
Yeah.
And, there's a blessing or there's a cursing. Like you said in your devotional, there's not a third option, if you think about it. So I'm thankful that you've got these in this list. I'm excited.
And another thing too, Ecclesiastes, it's more of the downfall, but even at the end, it seeks to give the reader the advice of like,